हाउ वाज द पेपर? ये वो तो सबको बता दिया होगा, इकोनॉमिक्स कैसा लगा? सही था? सही इन द सेंस व्हाट इज यूपीएससी स्टैंडर्ड? नो, हाउ डिड यू फील? यूपीएससी स्टैंडर्ड तो था. Was it attemptable or difficult in terms of the statements asked? Difficult था. ठीक है, it's a good thing that even if you have new facts coming from current affairs, this becomes a source of preparation. Even if you are getting new things to add on, certain basic conceptual questions, something you should ought to know, वहां पे conceptual mistake नहीं होनी चाहिए. This is why you wanted to test yourself in the exam environment. The second level of questions would be factual, which mostly comes from Indian economy. You should have a basic idea. For example, planning. You should know what various 5-year plans objectives was, what were their growth rates. So that is the basic level of preparation. Concepts of macroeconomics and Indian economy, the factual portion, what happened in the Indian economy, what are the schemes, what are the institutions. The next level of questions come current affairs derived, which are slightly difficult because the facts they ask from various topics. That becomes a source of preparation. वो तो आपको exam के बाद पता चलेगा ही. But otherwise also you can test yourself that from the gathered knowledge you have, can you attempt those questions or not? Nobody is saying that you would know the exact fact, but can you, from your various information you have gathered, can you solve that question or not? Attemptability क्या है question की? The fourth level of the question would be कि चारों statement doesn't make sense. So that is questions which we ought to leave. एक या दो question economics में हमेशा ऐसे आएंगे जो attempt नहीं हो सकते हैं. For example, last year they had given some questions which were very difficult to attempt. For example, innovation index में 3 कौन से variables हैं. So that is something if you don't know the fact, you'll not be able to attempt. The rest 15 questions is or 14 questions is where 3 or 4 based on your gathered knowledge, 5 questions concept, 5 questions Indian economy. तो वो 12 to 13 questions होने चाहिए. The same pattern has been followed here. There are 1 or 2 questions which are completely fact based, which would be very difficult to attempt. There are 3 to 4, 5 questions which are based on concept. Rest 5 are based on Indian economy and its facts. So those 10 questions is where you are testing yourself. On the remaining 15 questions, you're just checking whether you know things or not. Based on your gathered information, चीजें आती हैं या नहीं आती, जो guess work है. And that's not guess out of the blue. It is informed guessing. Out of the blue तो है कुछ नहीं आता और कोई भी mark कर दिया. That is something you don't have to do. Those questions are your source of preparation. Add the facts so that in UPSC, if the question comes, you have some information to solve that question. So these are the 3 to 4 type of questions which usually come from UPSC. Each and every question I'll tell you how exactly had to be solved. Which of the following statements, consider the following statements about exchange traded funds. What are exchange traded funds? See, one thing what this question first wants to say, कि 2015 to 2019, maximum 2020 तक, banking sector was in news because there was a lot of NPAs in the banking sector. So a lot of questions used to turn up from the banking sector. 2020, mostly the NPA problem has been solved. So if you see the trend from 21 onwards, the 3 years, you'll see maximum number of questions not from banking but for capital markets. So various instruments of capital markets, you'll see number of questions based on उनका tax free status है कि नहीं है, what do you mean by this instrument, what are the various instruments of capital markets, those things are being asked. So there's a slight shift of pattern of questions from banking to capital market. So this is a capital market instrument, that is exchange traded funds. So banking से shift हुआ है, but again you cannot discount the banking sector because current events are happening in the banking sector yet again. Whether it is the failure of the Paytm payment banks or the Kotak Mahindra Bank and what the RBI had done to deal with it. So banking sector remains important, but slightly less relevant as compared to what was happening in 15 to 20. Financial market is the key in the last 3 years. The probability उसके question की बढ़ गई, banking की थोड़ी कम है, but again we cannot discount any of the two. Exchange traded funds. What are exchange traded funds? What do you understand by exchange traded funds? Collective investment schemes? क्या होता है exchange traded funds? You know what are mutual funds? What happens in mutual funds? Investment. क्या होता है mutual fund में? उसी से exchange traded fund is also somewhat related. So the whole idea is that you have the stock exchange, there are number of shares, bonds which can be traded on the stock exchange, right? You don't have an idea which shares to buy, which bonds to buy. So what you do is, there's a particular asset management company. You give them your money, and on your behalf, they will have certain strategy of buying certain units. They will buy on your behalf certain shares and bonds. Those asset management companies which buy only shares, these are equity mutual funds. And those asset management company which buy bonds, these are debt mutual funds. Those mutual funds which buy the combination of two, these are called as hybrid funds. So what they do is, they have an active strategy where they'll buy certain shares and they keep on changing what their strategy is based on what they tell you in their offer document. आपने क्या किया है? You have just bought the units from this asset management company, and the value of the unit will keep on changing what their strategy is of investment. This is called as an active investment strategy, where you gave your money to the asset management company. It is managing the fund on your behalf. And they are changing their strategy based on whatever they have promised to you in the offer document. This is why any ad you see for mutual fund, please read the offer document before investing. Mutual funds are subject to market risk. Market risk क्या है? कि वो invest कर रहे हैं रोज तो value change होगी, right? Now what happens in an exchange traded fund is, a similar asset management company, what it does is, it combines certain shares and forms one basket of security. They'll form certain fund. That fund is going to track the underlying movement of these four. What you can do is, you can buy one unit of this basket. So what the asset management company has done for you, they are constantly not changing the strategy. What they have done is, they have combined 4 shares and created one exchange traded fund. इस fund को आप stocks की तरह buy कर सकते हो. This unit, this basket is called as exchange traded fund. Difference between the two is, both are pooled investment strategies, but difference here is that mutual fund will keep on changing the strategy. तो एक दिन हमने 4 shares 10 शेयर खरीद लिए, अब strategy change करेंगे tomorrow. So the value remains fixed for one day. But the value of this basket will keep on changing depending on how these 4 perform. So underlying asset को track कर रहा है ये basket. This could have number of securities, 4, 5, 10. एक particular हम define कर देंगे. Similarly, I can have other 3, और इन सातों को combination से मैंने एक और basket बना दी. This is basket 2. You can buy this basket 2 on the stock exchange. So you don't have to deal with the asset management company. You can directly buy basket 1 and basket 2 from the exchange. This is why the term traded on the exchange. All of these are regulated by SEBI itself. In this strategy, you don't have to deal with the asset management company. आप directly उनके funds को buy कर रहे हो market में. So that means exchange traded fund is trying to track the movement of underlying shares or underlying bonds or underlying currency or underlying any commodity. ये चारों चीजें कुछ भी हो सकती हैं. It could be shares, it could be bonds, it could be any commodity, it could be any metal. For example, you can have a gold ETF. What this gold ETF will do, it will track the underlying value of gold. अब gold ETF का similarly basket 1, basket 2, basket 3 है ये. You can buy any units of gold ETF. So this is more passive strategy because you are not changing the underlying asset. Here you can change whatever shares you are buying. So mutual fund जो manager है, वो हर रोज decide कर सकता है किधर invest करना कितना नहीं. So what mutual fund are trying to do is they're trying to beat the market. What ETF is doing, it is going to reflect the market. जो भी हो रहा है आपको इस unit में reflect हो जाएगा. This is what is called as an exchange traded fund. Now since exchange traded fund is being traded on the stock exchange, expense ratio कम आएगा because his strategy is changing every day. That means the management fees, the expense ratio here will be more as compared to what here, because you have already fixed the basket. You would not have a significant expense ratio. So the first statement they said, they have lower expense ratios compared to mutual funds. क्योंकि already मैंने बना दिया है एक ETF and now you are buying and selling that ETF directly on the exchange. You don't need to interact with the asset management company. Whereas in the case of mutual funds, these are active funds. They keep on changing their strategy to give you maximum returns. So today I bought these number of shares. The value in this day would be X amount. Next day I change my strategy, the value would be Y amount. तो पूरा दिन में एक ही strategy बन सकती है and I will have the closing value as what the returns I get. Actively change नहीं कर सकता within the day. They offer increased flexibility and liquidity compared to mutual funds. Why flexibility and liquidity? When you are buying the ETFs, this is just bought like a share in the stock exchange. ये basket के units आप कितने भी खरीद सकते हो. You can sell them also, you can buy them also, because you don't have to deal with the asset management company. That means you have more flexibility to sell them off and also buy them more, because they are traded on stock exchange. Mutual funds में, since the money gets locked, after a day itself is when you can withdraw your money. This is why flexibility and liquidity is less. Mutual funds की less है. Exchange traded fund are just like shares on the stock exchange. Their liquidity is more. They generally experience lower levels of short-term price fluctuations compared to mutual funds. Now compare ETF and mutual funds. I have a strategy जिसमें एक दिन मैंने 10 shares की value ली. Next day I can change the shares whatever I am buying, right? But can I do in ETF? That means ETF का value is coming from these 4 shares. They are being actively traded in the market. ABCD तो shares actively trade हो रहे हैं. That means पूरी मार्केट उड़ गई. No, you can't. This is why you bought this product. Passive investment ये है कि मैंने एक define करके basket बना दी. You can't change the basket. That basket will be available as a unit on the stock exchange. You buy 2 units, 3 units, but you can't change the basket. Mutual fund, you can change the basket. The fund manager is hired to do that only. You did not know the strategy. You hired the fund manager. You gave it to the fund manager. He is actively managing the fund on your behalf. So he is changing the strategy. So if he is changing the strategy, ETF cannot. ETF will be more volatile because पूरा दिन ही ETF में trade हो रहा है. You are buying, selling ETF. Someone else is doing. So its price movement will be highly volatile as compared to mutual fund. Because it is being traded just like a stock. तो पूरे दिन उसमें trading चल रही है plus minus. This is why highly volatile as compared to mutual funds. So the difference is one is an active investment strategy, the other is a passive strategy. कि वो already किसी ने बना के आपको unit दे दिया है, आप unit उसको stock exchange पे buy करो, sell करो. This is why it says more flexibility, liquidity. जितनी जिसकी flexibility, liquidity ज़्यादा है, उसकी volatility भी उतनी होगी. Because if someone is buying and selling very easily, that means the prices will be volatile. This is why third statement here is wrong. Exchange traded funds, as the name suggests, traded on the exchange. Is this clear? Lower expense ratio compared to mutual funds. It is already decided. Offer increased flexibility, liquidity, can be sold and bought on the stock exchange. Generally experience lower levels of fluctuations. They experience higher level of price fluctuations. This is incorrect. Answer would be only 2 statements are correct. Is the difference between the 2 clear? Active strategy and passive strategy. This is your difference between the 3. ETF is a basket of security that tracks an underlying index or sector. Underlying index हो गया जैसे हमने 4 का बनाया. ये पूरे इंडेक्स को भी बना सकता है. Nifty 50 stocks together. It can track anything. Currency ETF, it can track any currency also. So it's a basket which tracks an underlying asset. Single security stock, mutual fund investment revenue funds are pooled together, invested in different asset class based on objective. तो वो आपकी strategy के हिसाब से वो रोज investment strategy change कर सकता है. This is active, this is passive. Traded through the stock exchange, just like stocks. Mutual funds trades are fulfilled only once a day after the market closes. So whatever the strategy is, you can buy only after that. उसी की value तभी पता चलेगी आपको. Different types of ETF. You can have bond ETFs. You can have international exposure, currency ETFs, gold ETFs and stock ETFs. Different types. जो भी आप asset class उस basket में डाल रहे हो, that ETF will be traded on the exchange. So you will have an ETF just like stock exchanges. You can buy and sell anytime. This is what an exchange traded fund is. So हमने एक pool की security सारी और ETF में डाल दी. For example, there's a Bharat ETF, which is a ETF for central PSUs. 22 odd PSUs have been brought into that. So 22 PSUs की value track करेगा that ETF. Bought and sold on the stock market just like normal shares. Consider the following statement with reference to the payment and settlement systems. What do you mean by payment and settlement systems? If you have to make any particular payment, for example, you have a particular debit card, you visit any ATM, not necessarily of your bank, The moment you withdraw money, the account gets settled. It shows the money has been withdrawn. This is a payment system, payment or a settlement system. Similarly, you use a check, you use a draft, you use online banking. Online banking has RTGS, NEFT, IMPS. What are these? All of them are payment and settlement systems. Something which facilitates payments and settles the account. रियल टाइम सेटलमेंट होना चाहिए, अदरवाइज देयर बी अ लॉट ऑफ करप्शन. आपने एटीएम से ही पैसे निकाल लिया, फिर जाके चेक भी डाल दिया. If there is no real-time settlement, you will have duplication of money being moved from here to there. That means you need payment and settlement systems which settle the both accounts, debit from one, credit to another. And if you are withdrawing, the money should be deducted from your account. Should reflect whatever amount you have right now. Now, who designates payment and settlement systems in the country? It is the RBI. NPCI creates payment and settlement systems. Unka regulator RBI hai. Although RBI also has created a lot of payment and settlement systems. For example, RTGS has been created by RBI. NEFT has been created by RBI. IMPS has been created by NPCI. UPI has been created by NPCI. So this statement that the Act empowers central government to designate payment systems, it is not central government but the central bank. Central bank is the regulator of payment and settlement systems in the country. How are your ATMs operated? For example, किसी भी बैंक में आप जाओ, आप कोई भी कार्ड यूज करो ATM में, the money will be debited on your account also. What exactly is the instrument being used there? UPSC has asked this in a previous year question. The instrument is called National Financial Switch, NFS. This has been created by NPCI, which offers this facility of settling the accounts in the ATMs. Similarly, for clearing of checks, you can deposit any bank check in any bank. आप एक्सिस बैंक में HDFC का चेक डाल सकते हो, तो वो क्लियरिंग कैसे होती है? See, read about these payment and settlement systems because UPSC has asked multiple questions on these. Why this question needs preparation? Because all of these are general awareness. You use these instruments in daily life. You should know how these things work. That happens through a check truncation system, CTS. That has also been created by NPCI. Before this, it was magnetic ink character recognition, MICR. So there are a number of payment and settlement systems. You should know what is the difference between RTGS and NEFT. What is the difference between RTGS and IMPS? ग्रॉस सेटलमेंट का मतलब क्या है, वहां नेट सेटलमेंट का क्या मतलब है, आरटीजीएस में क्या होता है, रियल टाइम एंड ओके फुल फॉर्म एनईएफटी. So what exactly is the difference? When you choose to transfer funds, you get an option of RTGS, NEFT and IMPS, three functions, three settlement systems. NEFT नेट सेटलमेंट है. नेट सेटलमेंट मींस बैंक के पास आधे घंटे में कितना प्लस कितना माइनस होगा, एक ही बार सेटल होगा हर आधे घंटे के बैचेस में. RTGS is a gross settlement. It happens account to account in real time. And RTGS is only applicable for payments more than 2 lakh rupees. Basic features of these payment and settlement systems you should know. UPSC has asked questions, for example, Aadhaar Pay में कितने factor authentication है, UPI में how much factor authentication. So payment and settlement systems, you'll get all information on the website of NPCI. NPCI offers complete information about the all payment and settlement systems that have been created in the country. The Act prohibits foreign entities from operating a payment system in India. Now, this is both this. अब ये question है जो attemptable है. Even if you don't know the facts, you have to take a risk here. You know payment and settlement systems, and you know RBI is dealing with money and financial matters. So either RBI हो सकता है, SEBI हो सकता है, central government is difficult. So you can take a guess that it's not central government RBI. Now solve this second question from the things you know. Payment settlement systems क्या हैं? Something which is facilitating payments, right? You have a card, debit or a credit card. Which company is offering you that facility? Which company is offering you that card? RuPay, Visa and MasterCard. Why RuPay cards were introduced? And who introduced the RuPay card? NPCI, right? Why? We wanted to have our own domestic entity for card-based payments. Why? Because Visa and MasterCard are the payment system, something you are using. You know that Visa and MasterCard are operating in the country. So is it prohibiting foreign entities? तो ये guess work आपको पहुंचना है एग्जाम में. You don't know the facts, but you have enough information to solve this question. Western Union, transferring money from one to another. That is also giving you a payment and settlement system. money transfer, remittance services. Are they allowed in the country? So is it prohibiting foreign entities? Is it clear? Both the statements are wrong. RBI and foreign entities are allowed. You will have to reach to the answer. You will have to think outside the box. This question was completely attemptable. Thus, दो statement का question और आसान हो जाता है. Consider the following economic activities and events. How many of the above economic activities and events may promote financial inclusion? What do you understand by financial inclusion? Banking. Mobilization of savings to banking sector. Anything else? Financial inclusion का मतलब क्या है? For example, the thing related to financial inclusion is Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, right? Through the financial inclusion means you have certain financial services in the economy. What are financial services? Anything that deals with money or forms of money. For example, you have facility of banks, you have facility for financial service का मतलब है जो real और government नहीं है. That means anything that deals with money or claims on money. Claims on money are, say, shares, bonds. All of them are claim on money. You gave money, you got shares. That is a claim of ownership. You gave money, you got a bond. That is a claim of debt. Money or claim on money. Claim on money are called as financial securities. Right? These financial services available from formal sources, that means regulated sources, you need to have availability, access and choice. What do you mean by access? Access means availability means कि वो service होनी चाहिए पहले तो. Access means you should have physical access. That means nobody is stopping you from going to that place. घर के पास है financial service. You can have economic access. That means affordable service. It should not be very costly. And social access, that the service does not discriminate based on social markers such as caste, gender. के particular caste का है तो service नहीं मिल रही है. You need access on all this. Another access you can talk about is the literacy component. आपको पता होना चाहिए वो use होता कैसे है. This is also your access to the service. You know what exactly you are using. Choice means you should not be bound by just one product. You should have quality of service. Choice usually means innovation, which means quality of service delivery. So access, availability and choice of formal financial service is what we mean by inclusion. Financial services means anything that deals with money or claims of money. Banks dealing with money, deposits and loans. Insurance facility, risk protection. Investments, also you can have pension services. All of them are money or claims on money. Pension आज आप deposit करते हो, future में claim बनता है, आपको वो पैसे वापस मिलेंगे. Right? Now, which of the following activities will provide all of this? अब जनधन योजना अकाउंट क्यों खोला? कि easily availability और accessibility हो जाए. PM Disha is a scheme which includes financial literacy. All of these public sector bank oriented, ताकि cost भी ज़्यादा ना पड़े. जनधन योजना अकाउंट, zero balance account, and you have other services also. Offers you insurance, offers you also Jeevan Jyoti Yojana, Atal Pension Yojana, number of pension accounts also from those government banks. Inclusion of more economic activities under PSL norms by RBI. What are priority sector norms? Some sectors are considered important. The credit should flow to that direction, right? If I include more economic activities under PSL, that means more people will be getting loans in particular sectors. Definitely it is aiding these three under priority sector. In introduction of stringent KYC norms for banks to control non-defaulters. The moment I make stringent KYC norms, am I making the access difficult? Stringent KYC norms है तो access difficult हो गया. That is not financial inclusion. That means this is wrong. आपको कैसे पता जो present norms है वो सही नहीं है? I need 2 documents to verify who you are. I checked your ID when you entered the class. Now I am telling you कि जब admission कराया था जो slip थी वो भी लेके आओ. Norm stringent हो गया. क्या better हुआ? That means it is stopping you from attending the class. I asked you that you bring the ID card, but when you came here, I told you कि उस दिन जो कपड़े पहन गए थे वही कपड़े पहन के आओ. Stringent doesn't mean improving the efficiency. Stringent means making it difficult to file the norms. And anything which becomes stringent, will it promote inclusion? Inclusion का मतलब क्या है कि ये तीन चीजें आपको देनी है. Anything that forces you to not do that. For example, why do you think public sector bank, private banks, HDFC charges more for a loan? Same loan, SBI charges less, HDFC charges more. Why? Accessibility. Easy. फोन पे क्लिक पे HDFC लोन देगा, SBI 60 फॉर्म भरवाएगा. मुश्किल हो गया काम. In the name of stringent KYC itself, it is doing that because it wants more information about you. But is it making difficult for you to access that service? Definitely. You won't go for that service. Money lender ने बात भी नहीं पूछी, उससे ले लिया. Financial inclusion नहीं हुआ. Stringent means you can have an idea कि stringent means कुछ better हो रहा है. जरूरी नहीं है. It could be more hassle also. Promotion of financial literacy. Introduction of KYC norms for banks to control loan defaults. Then it would be question mark. You would not know. अब हो भी सकता नहीं भी हो सकता है. KYC norm then would say कि थोड़ा protection चाहिए, but जब तक मेरे को पता नहीं है कि उसकी stringency क्या है, मैं नहीं बता सकता. You would not get such a question, such a statement which doesn't make sense. मेरा पर्पस है एक्सेस करना, जितना इजीली एक्सेसिबल हो जाए. डिफॉल्ट को रखने के कुछ तो केवाईसी नॉर्म्स चाहिए होंगे. यू डोंट हैव आइडेंटिफिकेशन, हाउ विल आई ओपन योर अकाउंट? केवाईसी इज नो योर कस्टमर. आई एम जस्ट आस्किंग यू फॉर आधार कार्ड. स्ट्रिंजेंट के बिना मैंने सिर्फ आधार कार्ड मांगा, तो वो कुछ तो चाहिए ही होगा. प्रमोशन ऑफ फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी इन रूरल इंडिया. यस. क्लोजर ऑफ बैंक ब्रांचेस. बैंक ब्रांचेस आर लीडिंग टू व्हाट? अवेलेबिलिटी. सर्विस ही नहीं. एक्सेस तो तब करोगे जब सर्विस हो. अगर हमने बैंक ब्रांच ही हटा दी, दिस इज नॉट. दिस इज बाय to improve financial inclusion, we came up a model of banking correspondent, which was also called as bank mitras. People who will take the banking service to the people, to the certain employees of the banks, which will carry all the service to you, because I do not have the money to operate a bank branch. This is the concept of business correspondents, banking correspondents, or banking mitras. All of them would lead to financial inclusion. Is this clear? Only two statements here are correct. Now, causes of financial inclusion. See, if you have lack of requisite documents, तो अब documents को और stringent कर दोगे तो financial exclusion हो जाएगा. So these are the reasons why we have financial. Very important topic, not just for prelims, for mains. Because you have a topic written in mains which is called as inclusive growth and issues related to it. Inclusive growth एक broader है और एक उसका smaller subset है. Digital inclusion, financial inclusion, skill. All of these provide certain things to go to the inclusive growth. ये सारे dimensions हैं inclusive growth के. This year the question was, what are the schemes for digital inclusion? वो भी inclusive growth का question है. Certain measuring financial inclusion, access points कितने हैं, physical points, ATMs कितने हैं, bank branches कितने हैं, digital points of access service. Do you have a mobile service for providing access to the bank or not? Usage, how many accounts, credit formal institutions, insurance services कितना use हो रही हैं, and quality, the choice factor which I told you. With reference to household consumption expenditure survey, consider the following statement. Now, this is a factual question. You know it. Attempted. You don't know. You don't have an idea. You should not attempt this question because it's completely factual. Fact है कि rural में बड़ा कम हुआ, नहीं पता तो attempt नहीं कर सकते हो. Payment and settlement systems, with the information you have gathered, definitely you should attempt that question. First statement is easy. It is conducted by Ministry of Consumer Affairs every 5 years. Who conducts this? It is the National Statistical Sample Survey Organization under the MOSPI. NSSO, which was merged with CSO, and now it is single organization, that is NSO. This is very much talked about because the last survey which had to happen 5 years ago in 2017 was junked by the government citing data issues. This is why the last data we have is only of 2011-12. Every 5 years this is done. Why? Because this data is used for what? Policy making, तो सारा ही data use होगा. What policy making? ये बहुत critical data है for estimating one thing in the country. Consumption, वो तो survey है, but consumption survey किस लिए? GDP, does it come from consumption expenditure survey? Is it from consumption expenditure survey? Sample survey है. GDP का consumption 5 साल में एक ही बार देखोगे? सोचो क्या होता है इससे? In India, what is measured using consumption? How do we measure poverty in India? Based on consumption expenditure. How is the consumption expenditure estimated? NSSO consumption expenditure survey. Along with that, this is also used for updating CPI. CPI mein you have certain items and items are assigned weight. It's a weighted index. How do you assign weight? Based on how much percentage of expenditure people do on those items. जिस पे ज्यादा expenditure उसका ज्यादा weight. तो ये कहां से आता है? Primarily these two figures are what are updated using consumption expenditure survey. Poverty numbers cannot be known if you don't have consumption, because in India it is not based on income, it is based on consumption. It is conducted not by ministry. Rate of increase in rural India's MPC has been more compared to urban India. This is true. This fact is true. I'll give you information on the complete findings of this survey. Decrease in percentage share of expenditure on food. ये भी हुआ है. Expenditure on food has fallen and the rural expenditure has increased more than the urban expenditure. See, this is what the baseline data is. 2022 अगर हम करंट प्राइसेस आज के प्राइसेस पे देखें, रूरल हैज इंक्रीज फ्रॉम 1430 टू 3773 एंड द अर्बन हैज इंक्रीज फ्रॉम 260 थ्रू 6459. परसेंटेज इंक्रीज ये ज्यादा है एज कंपेयर टू दिस. इवन इफ यू विटनेस एज कांस्टेंट प्राइस, दैट इज प्राइस ऑफ 1112, देन ऑल्सो दिस इंक्रीज इज सिग्निफिकेंट एज कंपेयर टू दिस. So this is the measurement of how much it has happened. What do we mean by imputation? There are two types of data which expenditure survey does. One is when it does not calculate the free items you got. You got 5 kg food grains free. We are not calculating expenditure on that. You got gas free, you got number of items for the government free, वो नहीं calculate होती. That is without imputation. But if we calculate its imputed value, कि अगर आपने 5 किलो बाहर से खरीदा होता तो expenditure add होता. So there are two type of figures that come. Broadly, the data is seen without imputation. The expenditure on food, rural and urban areas, this is the average difference. No, this is the difference between the two over a period of time. This is your percentage change in food. In 52.9 to 46.38. This is the fall in food expenditure in rural areas from 11-12 to 2022-23. Cereals pe also it has reduced from 10 to 4. In urban areas also 6.6 to 3.6 and 42 to 39. The food expenditure has reduced. All of these data has been seen. You just note down this data. This fact can be asked in the exam. This is the percentage across fractile class. 0 to 5 percentile are spending only 1373 and the top 95 to 100 is spending 10,000. Roughly 10 times what the lowest is spending. This is across the fractile class, how much they are spending. Then across states, the broader data, which state do you think has the least monthly expenditures being done by the households, both rural and urban? एक ही state का है दोनों में. बिहार तो नहीं है. Chhattisgarh has the lowest. In average 2466 in rural areas and urban areas 4483. It's the lowest. Across rural and urban, it's the same state. Any idea which could be the highest? Maharashtra average तो no. छोटी स्टेट की ज्यादा होगी पर कैपिटा इनकम भी एक्सपेंडिचर भी. It is Sikkim. And in UTs में lowest is Ladakh and Lakshadweep, rural and urban में highest is Chandigarh. So complete data you can find for states. Highest lowest का पूछा जा सकता है एक fact. In fact income distance में सिक्किम ही सबसे ऊपर है. सिक्किम, गोवा, हरियाणा, 15 फाइनेंस कमीशन. हाईएस्ट पर कैपिटा इनकम पर स्टेट, हाईएस्ट इज सिक्किम, सेकंड इज गोवा, थर्ड इज हरियाणा. पिछले 3 साल की एवरेज देखी थी उन्होंने 2020 में. 17 to 20 का डेटा के अराउंड. फर्स्ट इज गोवा, फर्स्ट इज सिक्किम, सेकंड इज गोवा, थर्ड इज हरियाणा. एनी गेसेस विच इज द फोर्थ? 2020 का डेटा बता रहा हूं 15 फाइनेंस कमीशन का. हाईएस्ट पर कैपिटा इनकम पर स्टेट केरला. The fourth is Kerala. Consider the following statements. Aluminium freight train चलाई है इंडिया में 2022. This question is inspired from that freight train. Aluminium wagon rakes are 100% recyclable. This statement is true. 100% recyclable. Manufacturing cost of aluminium wagon rakes is lower than conventional rakes. This is also true. Sorry. Aluminium wagon rakes have a potential to reduce Indian current account deficit. Why would that happen? Maybe. Why? मे बी और मे बी नॉट ही है, दो तीसरा तो ऑप्शन ही नहीं है. बिकॉज कन्वेंशनल रेक्स में निकल और कोबाल्ट चाहिए जो हम इंपोर्ट कराते हैं. सो इफ यू रिप्लेस एल्यूमिनियम रेक्स विद conventional with aluminium, aluminium we have a very good production of aluminium. Bauxite का production India has good, export भी करता है primary raw material. So conventional rakes में nickel what is required is mostly imported. So if that import would not happen, we will have an increase in, or we will reduce the deficit on the current account, because imports of conventional rakes, the raw material required would be less. Carbon footprint of aluminium wagon is lower than conventional rakes. This is also true. And it can carry more payload per trip over conventional. This is the reason. ये चार reason apart from third. Second is a negative factor. 1, 4 and 5 is the reason why these rakes have been brought in. Recyclable, lesser carbon emissions and can carry more payload. This is why aluminium rakes being used in freight trains. The only disadvantage is that their cost is high. Significantly higher cost as compared to conventional rakes. Question number 5, difficult to attempt because 5 statements have been given and you need to know those 5 facts. अगर article पढ़ा है तो ही आ पाएगा, इसमें guesswork नहीं चल सकता है. This is a piece of information to help you solve questions in mains. Every statement is giving you certain information which will help you in, prelims. Consider the following statements regarding GDP and GVA. What is the difference between the two? There are 3 modes of calculation of GDP. One is expenditure, one is product method, and the income. From the product method, we get the gross value added. This comes at basic price. From the expenditure, we get the GDP. तीनों में GDP सिर्फ expenditure से ही आती है, because what is the meaning of or definition of GDP? It is the market value of all final goods. Market value आपकी सिर्फ expenditure से ही आ सकती है. This is why GDP comes at market price. All of them do not give me the GDP. They give me gross value added and also in income because it is at factor cost. I do not include what happens in the market because income is paid inside the factory. Very simple how we can calculate this. The production happens within the firm. That means income is paid within the firms to the factors of production. So this calculation happens at factor cost. When this product reaches the factory gate, I add the production tax and production subsidy, I get the basic price. That means when I reach the factory gate, I can calculate my total production and remove the intermediate consumption. This is my product method. And when this product reaches the market, this becomes, तीनों का कलेक्शन पॉइंट अलग है, इसलिए वैल्यू अलग जा रही है. इसकी फैक्टर कॉस्ट पे, गेट पे पहुंचते ही टोटल प्रोडक्शन माइनस इंटरमीडिएट कंजम्पशन, दिस गिव्स मी जीडीपी एट प्रोडक्ट. दिस इज जीवी एट बेसिक प्राइस. व्हेन इट रीचेस द मार्केट, इट बिकम्स जीडी एट मार्केट प्राइस. नाउ व्हेन वी मूव फ्रॉम फैक्टर कॉस्ट इनसाइड टू द फैक्ट्री गेट, आई एड प्रोडक्शन टैक्स and subtract the, because when I was producing something, the government gave me subsidy irrespective of what my production volume was. कि आपको लैंड मिलता है सस्ता, स्टैम्प ड्यूटी कम देनी है. मैं एक प्रोडक्ट बनाऊं, 500 बनाऊं, the subsidy remains the same. And I have to pay a production tax irrespective of what I'm producing. Production tax and production subsidy are independent of volume. So it reaches the factory gate. When it reaches the factory gate, I have GVA at basic price. Basic price के बाद market में I will have to pay certain form of indirect tax, GST लगेगा, and this is dependent on volume. एक product लूंगा 18%, 5 लूंगा 5 into 18, right? Plus I will, if the government has given me some subsidy, these are called as product tax and product subsidy. This forms the GDP at market price. Growth rate of a country can vary depending on one measures GDP और GVA, right? Because GDP में ये दोनों component भी added है, GVA में वो नहीं है. So growth rate can vary. Growth in tax collection and reduction in subsidies can inflate GDP numbers when GVA remains the same. Yes, this is the difference between the two. Difference is what? Product tax and product subsidy. उनमें changes होंगे. I can have changes between GDP and GVA. So 1 is correct and statement 2 is the reason why 1 is correct. Answer here is A. Is it clear? 3 methods, different price points for collection within the factory, factor cost, at the factory gate basic price and at the market price. Income method, product method and expenditure method. Question number 7. Business and economic parlance, the term cheetah and gazelle sometimes refers to. Again, a piece of information you get from this. Last year, UPSC asked a question, what is beta? That same question on similar lines, cheetah and gazelle kya hai? Developing countries having rapid growth, shares expected to provide high returns, startups expected to attain unicorn status, sunrise industries having high potential for employment generation. Now, can you attempt this question? बीटा से आसान है क्वेश्चन, बीटा के तो सारे रिलेटेबल थे ऑप्शंस. नाउ इफ यू सी द ऑप्शंस हियर, डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज हैविंग रैपिड इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ रेट. इफ यू आर रीडिंग द न्यूज़पेपर डेली तो समझ आता चीता गजल होता, कुछ इंडिया चीता होता या चाइना गजल होता, राइट? यू हैव टू ट्रस्ट दैट इंस्टिंक्ट, because if you are reading about developing economies you would know these terms. That means option B has less chance of being correct. Shares expected to provide high returns, अब बीटा से पता चलना चाहिए था, ये भी नहीं हो सकता है. Startups or sunrise industries having high potential. Now if sunrise industries having high potential for employment generation, हर हफ्ते हिंदू एक आर्टिकल छापता है इस पे. Because India's problem is what? Employment generation. India's problem is not economic growth rate. India's problem is this. So that means if you not read about these things, थोड़ी probability बनती है unicorns, and this is how you can again take an attempt here. Because the options are not related. A option you had to know because you got a question on beta last year. So beta gamma पे आपको थोड़ी value alpha की पता होनी चाहिए वो चीजें हैं क्या. So that eliminates A, and then the question becomes easy. Because employment generation and growth rate you would have definitely read in the newspaper in the last 1.5 years. You've not read it, that means these terms have no meaning apart from startups. Answer here is C. You will have to make this informed guessing in the exam. क्योंकि इसमें तो रिलेटेड नहीं है. जब चारों ऑप्शंस अगर हम शेयर्स पे या स्टार्टअप से बनाते, देन इट इज डिफिकल्ट. बट हियर यू हैव टू एलिमिनेट बी एंड डी. Consider the following statements regarding 5-year plans. India did not achieve its growth target in the first 2 5-year plans. Yes, what was the growth target in first 5-year plan? 2.1%, and achieved was 3.6. So did it not achieve its target? So it did not achieve its growth target in the first 2. It definitely achieved in the first. Second mein what was the target? So it did definitely achieve in the first, did not achieve it in the second. उसके बाद फर्स्ट के बाद सीधा अचीव किया है फिफ्थ में, and then constantly sixth में we have increased and seventh also. These two were the period of recovery. Government expenditure became high in sixth and seventh. That was the reason for crisis, because government in sixth and seventh, 1980 to 85, 85 to 90 increased the expenditure but did not have the money for it. Debt से सारा expenditure बढ़ाया जिससे fiscal deficit बढ़ा. Fiscal deficit fueled demand, demand fueled more imports, and that led to the external crisis. Internal problem था fiscal deficit और inflation का, which spilled to the external sector. And the problem happened when there were two major events. The disintegration of Soviet Union, India was exporting to those countries. Exports went down. And the Gulf War, prices of oil doubled in one day, $17 per barrel to $34 per barrel. So this is what the immediate reason for the crisis. But पिछले 10 साल में ये जो शूट की है ग्रोथ, ये सारी destabilized ग्रोथ थी, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट started investing in infrastructure without having the money for it. Fiscal deficit double digit, fiscal deficit fueled inflation. Because if government spends more, it will fuel inflation. And supply side is not changing. Inflation, imports are easy. So first May it achieved, second May it did not achieve. Objective of 8 5-year plan was towards faster and more inclusive growth. Inclusive growth for the first time is mentioned when? Yes, 2011 5-year plan, 2007 to 12. Again talked about inclusive growth in 12 5-year plan. 8 5-year plan, what is it talking about? LPG reforms, right? LPG reforms में government क्या करेगी? What do you mean by plan first? प्लान का मतलब क्या है? Plan means one thing. This is how the government implements anything. Policy is the broader direction. Policy is broken down into program and scheme. किसी particular program में कितना पैसा जाएगा? This is what is plan. 5-year plan is telling you what program to be designed and what money to be given, right? And this plan is working as per the targets. That means the government controls how much money goes where. But when we are talking about 91, are we talking about investment led by government? 91 onwards we are talking about. तो गवर्नमेंट क्या करेगा फिर? प्लान में व्हाट इज हैपनिंग? प्लान विल ओनली facilitate. In what ways can government facilitate? Either by building or by providing. तो बस यही दोनों चीजों पे एफर्ट है 10th 8th से लेकर 12th तक. Government cannot invest now. You cannot have heavy industries or you cannot have investment in agriculture because investment आपने सारा मार्केट को दे दिया. What we say is 8th 5-year plan onwards, plan became truly indicative. What do we mean by indicative? Target indicate कर रहे हैं जाना कहां है, डायरेक्ट नहीं कर रहे हैं करना कैसे है. From 1st till 8th, they had features of directed planning. They were telling you where to go because they were giving money in particular sectors. Now they are only facilitating, they are only indicating where to go. They are not directive planning, which was followed in USSR. Directive or imperative planning. What happens in directive planning? What you do is you set a target for the sector. Agriculture has to achieve say 4%. How will the sector achieve 4%? Until and unless you have a target for a particular unit. ये अचीव करेंगे तभी ये अचीव करेंगे. इन दोनों के लिए टारगेट सेट किए, जो डायरेक्शन था पूरे करने हैं. इंडिया हैड सम फीचर्स ऑफ डायरेक्टिव प्लानिंग फ्रॉम 1st to 8th 5-year प्लान. इंडस्ट्री पास टारगेट था, ये पूरा करना है, गवर्नमेंट वॉज इन्वेस्टिंग. नाउ 8th 5-year प्लान ऑनवर्ड्स, यू आर ओनली इंडिकेटिंग डायरेक्शन. You are not telling how much because you are only investing in these two. Investment सारी होगी market led. Government will not control. So it was not faster and more. वैसे तो inclusive ही होगा because you are investing in. But this happened in 11th, not in 8th. 8th was facilitating investment in some sectors by giving a environment in broader macroeconomy. And second, trying to tackle poverty and unemployment. That is it clear? Inclusive growth was not mentioned in 8th, it was mentioned in 11th. 12th 5-year plan reduced the number of CSS in order to improve their effective implementation. This was part of 12th. What do you understand by centrally sponsored schemes? Centrally sponsored schemes are those which are formed usually on state list or concurrent list subject and are financed both by center and state. तो इनमें प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि हम इनको हमेशा कम करने की बात करते हैं. दिस इज ऑलवेज अ पॉइंट ऑफ कंट्रोवर्सी बिटवीन सेंटर एंड स्टेट. सेंट्रली स्पॉन्सर्ड स्कीम अभी भी चल रही है. वेस्ट बंगाल इज आस्किंग फॉर मनी अंडर मनरेगा विच द सेंटर इज नॉट रेडी टू गिव. मनरेगा इज अ सेंट्रली स्पॉन्सर्ड स्कीम. द प्रॉब्लम इज वट एवर मनी कम्स फ्रॉम सेंटर टू स्टेट, इट इज अ टाइट फंड. दैट मीन्स यू हैव टू फुलफिल सर्टन कंडीशंस. जब तक कंडीशंस फुलफिल नहीं होंगे पैसे नहीं मिलेंगे. अटेंडेंस नहीं है आधार बेस्ड तो पैसे नहीं मिलेंगे. All of the fund that comes from center to states under centrally sponsored scheme is conditional. So why states complain? पहले तो आपने हमारे लिस्ट पे स्कीम बनाई. You did not involve us in design of scheme. There was no involvement of state in design. You asked us to contribute money where your money was tight. Earlier what the ratio was 60 to 40 for all the states. For northeastern and hilly states it was, again it was not general or special category, all states and northeastern or hilly states. Now what the government has planned is, और वो पैसा आएगा. This is why it is a controversial. The first thing that Niti Aayog did was constitute a subgroup of chief ministers to reduce the number of CCS. और उन्होंने 66 से 29 पे ले गए. Reduced it in the form of core of the core and optional. This is what they did in Niti Aayog in 2015. So there has always been talk about reduction of centrally sponsored scheme because it takes away the power of the state government. 12th 5-year plan had this option. So the statement that is correct is only one. Is it clear? This is question you need to know. Because centrally sponsored scheme तो अभी दोबारा केरला का केस है कोर्ट में. West Bengal is complaining. West Bengal, Kerala is complaining, and also this one. Karnataka is also complaining it does not have funds. So center-state relations are very important. You need to know how the money goes, in what form the money goes. This is a very important topic. This is a potential for mains question in both paper 2 and paper 3. Center-state relations governing finances. Various problematic issues can be asked in both paper 2, paper 3, and the dimensions in prelims. Which inflation index is used to adjust the purchase price of capital assets on basis of inflation? This was an important thing which happened in last year budget. Last year budget, this year budget to cannot introduce new schemes both in taxation and expenditure. Why? Because it is an interim budget, the government is about to go, new schemes will come in the new budget which the new government will present. New government. Long term, अरे छोड़ो यार ये video. Long term capital gains. Now what happened in this? You know what is the idea of capital gains? You purchase an asset. When you sell the asset, if you get a profit, you have to pay a tax. Now why this question is asked? Because last year ये budget में change हुआ था, which is a very big change. We discuss right now that there can be mutual funds which invest only in bonds. अभी पता है म्यूचुअल फंड 3 टाइप के होता है. वन विच इन्वेस्ट इन स्टॉक्स, वन विच इन्वेस्ट इन बॉन्ड्स, एंड वन विच इन्वेस्ट इन बोथ हाइब्रिड म्यूचुअल फंड्स. लास्ट ईयर द गवर्नमेंट रिमूव्ड द इंडेक्सेशन बेनिफिट्स ऑफ डेट म्यूचुअल फंड्स. When capital gains tax was to be levied on debt mutual funds, they removed the indexation benefits. Now what are indexation benefit? When I sold the asset and I had a profit, this asset was bought at certain price. Now when I sold it, there would be certain price increase because of inflation. So actual profit मेरा हुआ 100 रुपए, but 80 रुपए का inflation भी था उसमें. तो मेरा total profit is, when I adjust it to inflation, that means I have got benefit of indexation. So debt mutual funds, for calculating their capital gains, used to get indexation benefit. That means any impact of inflation had to be removed. And if you have to remove the impact of inflation, that means you will have to find out what the inflation rate was. Indexation के लिए आपको किसी इंडेक्स से पता करना होगा कि क्या है वो है. This index is cost inflation index. Last year indexation benefits हटाए थे debt mutual fund से. So how do we know? It is not related to CPI or WPI, it is related to cost inflation index. Every year income tax will tell you CBDT कि क्या हमारा cost inflation index है. So that if in certain instruments you have to get indexation, how will we calculate indexation? ये 80 कहाँ से आएगा? That will come from cost inflation index. Budget derived question. Last year budget is what? They introduced this feature के indexation benefits नहीं मिलेंगे. Indexation का मतलब है adjustment of profits with inflation. How will I calculate this? Calculate through an index called cost inflation index. Sorry. CBDT, yes. Income tax करता है, approve करेगा government, 75%, 80% CPI का ही बनता है ये cost inflation index. The easiest question in the paper. Which of the following are considered as reflation policies? What do you mean by reflation? Trying to increase the price level. Inflation is trying to control inflation is controlling price level. Reflation is trying to push for growth. Economy में downturn चल रहा है, आप उसको उठाने की कोशिश कर रहे हो. Price index is falling, you are trying to improve it, right? How will you improve reflation? That means you have to do opposite of inflation control. You have to reflate the economy, right? Increasing money supply. Yes, more money chasing few goods, inflation. Reducing tax rate. Yes, why? Reduction in tax rates would mean consumption expenditure and investment expenditure would increase. These will increase, aggregate demand will increase, aggregate demand increase, demand pull inflation. Raising interest rates. ये उल्टा होगा क्योंकि investment will fall. Investing in large government projects by the government. Government expenditure increases, also again your aggregate demand increases. The answer would be 3. This is a factual question. Consider the following, and this is something you should know. Factual question directly from current affairs. Green deposits. It is applicable to all deposit taking NBFCs registered with RBI, scheduled commercial banks and small finance banks. What is the idea of green deposit? Whatever deposit you do as green deposit, that will be used for giving out loans for projects which are environmentally safe. Green finance में use होगा वो money, whatever you give green deposit. Earmarked for certain things, used for only environment projects, where right now RBI in its notification said, जो green taxonomy है, that is green projects जो define है, उसी में पैसा जाएगा. Till the time the Indian government does not define the green economy, green taxonomy, we are going to give you certain projects जो इसमें count होंगे. So they have defined what projects will be counted under that. Loans will go for these projects only. Certain projects they've also given a negative list. Nuclear energy, say for example, will not be counted. So what are the approved projects? What are the not approved projects? You need to know both. Allowed entities कौन सी हैं? Scheduled commercial banks, including small finance banks. Exclude RRBs, local area and payment banks. All deposit taking NBFCs. NBFCs are of two types. One is non-deposit, one is deposit. And deposits, what type of deposits do they take? NBFCs, are they allowed to take deposit? What is the difference between NBFC and banks? NBFCs are not allowed to take demand deposit. Term deposit NBFCs ले सकते हैं. And they take term deposits, but RBI still feels it is a risky activity. 97 के बाद एक भी license नहीं मिला है NBFC deposit taking को. So they are very less in number. Majorly they are NBFCs non-deposit taking. NBFCs can take deposits, but term deposits. On demand नहीं ले सकते, यही major उनका differentiating factor है between bank and NBFCs. So first statement is correct. Investments made by a bank in sovereign green bonds are covered under the framework. Yes. If government released green bonds, bank makes an investment in that using the green deposit, that will be counted. So bank got a deposit, bank put that money in investment. या तो bank loan देगा या bank invest करेगा. Investment in green bonds issued by the government will be covered. This statement is a correct statement. Green projects financed under the framework can be classified under priority sector if they meet priority sector lending guidelines. Yes or no? Priority sector कौन से हैं? Agriculture, MSME. छोटे छोटे और क्या? Education, housing, right? Social infrastructure 5. Export credit, social infrastructure, water. Export credit 6. Weaker sections miscellaneous 7. What is the 8th? जो add हुआ है 2015 में. Renewable energy. So this is counted. Green projects classified under priority sector meeting the guidelines. This is a fact. You should know 8 facts. UPSC last year itself has asked question. MSME, all loans given to MSME are priority sector. So 8 sector का information होना चाहिए कौन से sector है. Answer all 3 are correct. The including companies, the projects, and certain figures, certain more facts. For example, Indian rupees में denominated होगा deposit, not in foreign. So certain facts to be considered. Consider the following. How many of the above benchmarking mechanisms are eligible for external benchmarking lending rate? What do you mean by external benchmarking lending rate? Interbank lending rate तो बिल्कुल नहीं. Interbank lending rate, what is the market called? LIBOR, MIBOR तो उसके rates हैं. अगर हम reference rates use करें, right? What is the market called? Call, notice and term money. Call, notice and term money market. Interbank market for telephonic loans. What is external benchmark? It's a very famous concept. What is external benchmarking? He said last question है. 3 और है. Nobody knows what is external benchmarking? नहीं, अब ध्यान आ जाएगा. So what happens is, if RBI takes any action for the banks, that is increase or decrease the repo rate, the banks should pass it on to the customers. For example, if RBI increases the repo rate, right, what should happen to the loan rate and what should happen at the deposit rate? Loan rate should become expensive. RBI को महंगा पैसा मिल रहा है तो loan rate बढ़ेगा. If RBI is giving banks loan at a higher rate, will the depositors also demand higher rates? आरबीआई आपको पैसा महंगा दे रहा है तो हम आपको सस्ता दे देंगे पैसा, आप भी ज्यादा डिमांड करोगे, right? That means whatever RBI does, bank have to pass on both. Similarly, when RBI reduces repo rate, loan rate should be less. Similarly, RBI को कम मिल रहा है तो deposit भी आप नहीं दोगे ज्यादा. All the interest rates move in the same direction. This is what ideally should happen. Now, if the repo rate increases, loan rate does not increase, or if the repo rate decreases, the loan rate does not decrease. This will depend on how the banks are pricing their loan. अगर आरबीआई ने रेपो बढ़ाया, मेरा भी लोन बढ़ना चाहिए, वो डिपेंड करेगा कि मैं प्राइस कैसे करता हूं लोन. Now what mechanism is this clear? If RBI increases loan, I should also increase the loan rate. That will depend on how I'm pricing my loan. Now how is the bank pricing the loan? There were different factors on which the banks were pricing the loan. 1993 तक तो RBI was telling them how to price. It was the RBI which decided. After 93, RBI gave them freedom. First, it was called as the prime lending rate. This system was not a very successful system. 2004, we moved to a benchmark prime lending rate. Then we moved to base rate. And then 2016, we moved to MCLR. I'll not go into the details what exactly was used here. But all of these four rates were the internal benchmarks of the bank. Bank अपने cost of funds के हिसाब से चारों rate decide कर रहा था. Now, if bank was deciding based on internal benchmarks, so when I reduced the repo rate, loan rate did not reduce. In the benchmark prime lending rate, in the base rate, in the MCLR, चारों system में ही जब RBI ने repo कम किया, then the loan rate did not fall. That means monetary policy was not being transmitted. The issue is in transmission. Monetary policy is not transmitted, so whatever the RBI does, people do not feel the change. If people do not feel the change, RBI said, आपने अब तक जो भी mechanism use किया, that was based on how you calculated, that is internal benchmarks. In 2019, RBI said, you will not price your loan on internal benchmarks, instead you will use external benchmarks. आप कोई भी एक benchmark choose करो, उसके ऊपर अपना, you can charge a certain spread, कि आपका operating cost, and that becomes the loan rate. What all benchmarks can you use? You can use the benchmark of repo. You can use the 91 treasury bill. You can use 182. अब ये तीनों जो factors हैं, these are not in your control. Till now, what you were using was in your control. Now, these three are market determined, RBI determined. So if you price the loan on repo plus spread, ये factor आप control नहीं कर पाओगे. जैसे ही repo कम होगा, loan rate कम हो जाएगा. जैसे ही repo बढ़ेगा, loan rate बढ़ जाएगा. So RBI suggested use these four indicators. Any other benchmark created by a benchmark limited for financial benchmarks India Limited. Use external benchmarks जो आप control नहीं करते हो. This is how you will improve the passing on the repo rate changes. For two loans, they made it mandatory. After 2019, whatever loans you will give to retail customers or you will give it to MSME customers, आपको वो loan pricing external benchmark पे करनी है. So after 2019, for MSME loans and for retail loans, banks have to price their loans on external benchmarks, not on internal. MCLR भी fail हो गया था, base rate, everything failed. कि pass on नहीं हो रहा था जो RBI कर रहा है. It was not being passed on because of banks' internal factors. All of these four had certain factors which were decided by the bank themselves. Now we are taking the control away from the bank and telling them to use external benchmark for pricing their loans. What external benchmarks? The RBI suggested these four. This is what do you mean by external benchmark lending rate. Mandatory after 2019 for retail and MSME. Answer here is all four are correct. How many of the above are ways of gross capital formation? What is gross capital formation? GDP ka basic. What is gross capital formation? No one has an idea? All stocks. होता मतलब क्या है इसका ग्रॉस कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन का? if we calculate GDP by expenditure method, we have consumption, investment, plus technically what it is called private final consumption expenditure, gross capital formation, government final consumption expenditure, and net export. Private final consumption expenditure, household spending money on consumption goods. Gross capital formation is how much is the total investment in the economy. That means now how is asset creation or investment happening? One is gross fixed capital formation. What is gross fixed capital formation? जो भी आपने fixed asset बना, machine, roads, government can also build gross fixed capital formation, buildings, all of them are fixed capital. Machines, tools, roads, ports, ships, everything is a fixed capital. Along with that, the capital formation which the firm does, the firm might have bought a certain raw material which it could not convert. I bought a certain cotton, I would convert it into fabric, but मैं बना नहीं पाया उस साल में. That means cotton becomes the final material. That will also be part of gross capital formation, which is called as change in inventory. What do we mean by that? I bought certain items which I could not convert. Second, I had certain items which I created but could not sell. दोनों पे मेरा investment हो चुका है. That is part of gross capital formation. And gold or artistic material bought by household. These are called as valuables. All of the three are part of capital formation. Capital formation is nothing but investment. Gross fixed capital, construction of new home by household, roads by government, machines by industry. All of them are fixed capital. Valuables, gold or artistic material being bought by the household. All of them are classified as capital formation. Acquisition of existing tangible fixed asset, right? Tangible fixed asset, fixed capital formation. Acquisition of new intangible fixed asset, right? Fixed asset एक tangible हो सकता है कि हमने machine बनाई, एक intangible भी हो सकता है मैंने software खरीदा, और I bought a piece of art, I bought a entertainment material, valuables. Improvement to tangible non-produced asset. नॉन प्रोड्यूस्ड एसेट क्या हो सकता है? एसेट, व्हाट डू यू डिफाइन बाय एसेट? इन्वेस्टमेंट एसेट क्रिएशन है. एसेट क्या होता है? व्हाट डू, हाउ इज एसेट डिफाइंड? यस, एनीथिंग व्हिच गिव्स यू अ फ्यूचर गेन. या तो एसेट की रेगुलर वैल्यू आएगी, उसको बोलते हैं इंटरेस्ट, और एसेट की वैल्यू बढ़ेगी. दो तरह से फ्यूचर गेन हो सकता है. एसेट की वैल्यू बढ़ेगी, एंड सेकेंड, एसेट विल गिव यू अ रेगुलर इनकम इन द फॉर्म ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. Capital gets interest. Factors of production, capital good creation is investment, and the return to that is interest. So regular interest, and second is gain in value. This is what is called as capital gains. Regular income interest, capital gains, two things, future gain. Now improvement to tangible non-produced asset. Non-produced asset कौन सा हो सकता है? ये सिर्फ language play है. Question was very easy. What could be a non-produced asset? जो produce नहीं होता और वो asset है. If I make improvement to land, what can I do improvement to land? Tangible है land, क्या improvement कर सकता हूं? Construction बना सकता हूं land के ऊपर. Will that be part of gross capital formation? एक तो machine है जो existing tangible assets हैं, एक जो non produced asset के ऊपर मैं construction कर दूं. All of the three would be part of only language play. This was the only thing. Otherwise, कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन का मतलब क्या होता है? वहीं से तीनों चीजें आ जाती. एसेट क्रिएशन, कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. इन्वेस्टमेंट इज कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर. फिक्स्ड, चेंज इन इन्वेंटरी प्लस वैल्यूएबल्स. कोई भी गवर्नमेंट डेटा देखो, द फर्स्ट थिंग इन जीडीपी विल टॉक अबाउट दीज थ्री. इज इट क्लियर? आंसर इज ऑल थ्री. Consider the following statements regarding agreement on trims. UPSC has asked this question verbatim. WTO के agreements are important. You have three foundational agreements of WTO. What are the agreements? WTO was formed in 1995. 3 foundational agreements. One was GATS and TRIPS. Under these are various other agreements. For example, GATT में you have agreement on agriculture and TRIPS. Agreement on agriculture, but this year they asked a question in mains itself. India has certain problem with its subsidies with WTO. It's all about agreement on agriculture, Amber box. Right? TRIMS is part of General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. Right? TRIMS is not part of GATS. Only applies to goods. It doesn't apply to services. Now, what exactly is TRIMS trying to do? TRIMS is part of GATT. Now, what TRIMS says is, understand carefully, TRIMS is not related to investment protection. तो अगर आपकी कंट्री में FDI आता है, इस FDI के ऊपर कोई रेगुलेशन या प्रोटेक्शन का बात नहीं करता है TRIMS. What TRIMS says is, if your government has certain measures on FDI or private investment that creates a distortion in trade and trade in goods. That means you place any regulation on your investment, whether domestic or foreign, that somehow prohibit trade in goods. That measures will be not allowed. If you have any regulations on investment, whether foreign or private, that prohibits trade in goods, those measures will not be allowed. For example, if you place a limit on private investment or foreign direct investment, किसी पे भी, that you have a limitation, that you have a domestic content requirement. That means, if you are bringing in imports from outside, in imports में थोड़ा बहुत आपको domestic content add करना पड़ेगा. But same regulation आपकी domestic good पे तो नहीं है. You are placing a limit on imports that you will have to add certain domestic content value addition here. This is the requirement of domestic content. You don't have the same on domestic goods. And WTO's national treatment principle says, once the good lands in your country, it has to be treated at par with your. You created a regulation on investment that is prohibiting against imports. This is one type of prohibition you have put. Otherwise, if you put a quantity limitation on import, कि आप 10 प्रोडक्ट से ज्यादा नहीं ला सकते, तो आपने नेशनल ट्रीटमेंट फिर वायलेट कर दिया. और यू से यू कैन ओनली इंपोर्ट व्हेन यू आर 10 गुड एक्सपोर्ट करोगे तो ही 5 इंपोर्ट कर सकते हो. दिस इज कॉल्ड एज ट्रेड बैलेंसिंग. So if you have measures like domestic content requirement, trade balancing or quantity limitations, what these measures are doing, they are creating a distinction between imported goods and domestic goods. That means they are violating. So any regulation on investment which prohibits trades in goods, creates a difference between imported and domestic, those will not be allowed. That means we are not creating protection of FDI versus this. हम ये बोल रहे हैं किसी भी इन्वेस्टमेंट पे आपने ऐसा मेजर लगाया जो ट्रेड इन गुड्स को इंपैक्ट करता है, दैट विल बी प्रोहिबिटेड. दिस इज व्हाट इज ट्रेड रिलेटेड इन्वेस्टमेंट मेजर्स. इन्वेस्टमेंट मेजर्स इंपैक्टिंग द ट्रेड इन गुड्स, दिस इज वेयर ट्रिम्स अप्लाई. इट इज नॉट क्रिएटिंग नेशनल ट्रीटमेंट और MFN on these two. It is saying irrespective of who invests, if it investment proceedings have an impact on trade in goods, that will not be allowed. It is not protecting investment. It is only protecting trade in goods. It prohibits certain measures that violate the national treatment and quantitative restrictive. This is impacting trade in only goods. Services are not included. All WTO member countries are part of this agreement. This is correct. Is it clear what TRIMS is? Investment protection नहीं है, investment regulation नहीं है. Any measure of investment that impacts the trade in goods is what is regulated. Trade in goods should be impacted. Question number 74 of statement of fact. Which of the following are required for full membership in International Energy Association? This is information collection from the paper, very difficult to attempt. Crude oil and product reserves equivalent to 90 days of the previous year's net imports to which government has immediate access. This is true. This fact should be there. Demand restraint program to reduce national oil consumption by 10%. This is also true. Legislation that oil companies report information and members should be not a group of 20 but OECD. So this is a statement of fact which you get from the exam. Very difficult to attempt otherwise. This is not correct. G20 wala. That is OECD. 75. Consider the following types of deposits. How many of the above are insured by DICGC? What is DICGC? इस बॉडी का काम क्या है? Default. Is it on default? This body, DICGC, does two functions. One, provides insurance to a deposit. Who pays the premium for that? This is only paid by the bank. Bank will bear the burden of this insurance. Whoever deposits money in the bank, that money is insured to the tune of 5 lakh rupees, both principal and interest. The premium for this is to be paid by the insured bank, not the customer who is giving the deposit. The rate of which is decided by this body. This body is 100% owned by RBI. Deposit Insurance Act of 1961. Credit guarantee was added later. What do you mean by credit guarantee? What do you mean by credit guarantee? Loan के लिए you need collateral. Some sectors, some players would not have the collateral. तो उनकी गारंटी ये ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आरबीआई उनको दिलवा सकते हैं इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से. Providing guarantee on loans is also one of the functions where RBI thinks, for example, MSME mein we need credit guarantee. There was a scheme, emergency credit guarantee scheme in COVID. Who will provide that credit guarantee? RBI is allowing this body to provide that credit guarantee. So two functions: deposit insurance, providing insurance to each bank account to the tune of 5 lakh rupees. The money will be paid by the bank. Which all are, how many of the above are secured? Recurring deposits are insured, baki ye तीनों are not insured. There is a negative list of what gets insured and what is not covered here. Only recurring deposits, this is a normal deposit. Interbank deposits of foreign governments and deposits of state governments are not insured. Answer here is only one. Few facts I've given here. Which banks are covered? Commercial bank including branches of foreign banks in India, local area and regional rural banks. Cooperative banks are also included part of this. All eligible cooperative banks defined under the Act. State, central and primary cooperative banks. Who pays certain features? कितने पैसे लगेंगे? कब कब उन्हें insurance pay करना है? If there is a delay in paying the insurance fees, there is also a 8% interest they have to pay. The tune is 5 lakh rupees. Earlier it was only 5,000 when the scheme started. Recently 2020 mein they have come. Type of deposits covered. All bank deposits, saving, fixed, current, recurring except the following types. Foreign governments, state center, interbank, state land development banks with state cooperatives, any amount of deposit received outside India and any amounts exempted by the corporation by the RBI. These are the exceptions. This is what the question has asked. Is this clear? The questions with respect to this. If you have any doubts. हाँ वो भी नहीं है, ये exception है. All of these are exceptions. So question is asking which of them are covered. These are exceptions except the following types of deposits. So ये covered नहीं है. You have any doubts? This is the email address. Thank you. 9 बज गए. Have a nice day.